Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Jim Fitzgerald. Fitz, how are you?
I'm fine, Ray, and this is kind of a special episode of Cold Red. We're going to kind of throw off our seasonal symmetry because of what happened. Probably the second biggest crime of the first quarter of the century. We'll say 9/11, number one, and number two was the attempted assassination just barely 48 hours ago of, quite frankly, the front runner for the presidency of the United States, Donald Trump. And you and I agreed, let's get together, put something out. We're a true crime podcast. We'd be remiss if we didn't put something out for our audience. And I happen to know of Dan Sullivan through some friends, retired Secret Service, and I thought, yeah, he'd be a great guest to have on. So a little belated here, Dan, but welcome to Cold Red.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Dan, if I can start you off, give us a minute or two. What's your background? How did you get into the Secret Service, and how did you rise through the ranks? It's an interesting story in itself. I know you're a military vet. Thank you up front for your service.
Sure. I'm a Marine. I spent right out of high school. I went in the Marine Corps, and that was 1967. So I spent the next 4.5 years in the Marine Corps. I was in Vietnam, 1968 to 1969. And then I went on embassy duty, spent 2 years at the U.S. Embassy, Rabat, Morocco. Got out of the Marine Corps, started college, and went on a police department in Santa Barbara, California. I went on to Department 73, and in 1980, when Ronald Reagan was running for office, he had a ranch in Santa Barbara. I was a detective at the time and named as the liaison to the Secret Service. And 2 years later, I was out of college and they recruited me. What can I say?
What a great story. We'll bring you back sometime. I'd love to hear your Vietnam stories, your Marine stories, but obviously we're focused tonight. So you're in the Secret Service, you go through the academy. It used to be in Maryland. I think I was there once.
Beltsville, Maryland. Yeah, we all start off in Glencoe at
Right.
FLETC, and then we go to our base in Beltsville, Maryland for a special agent training course. I was assigned to the LA field office at the time, and in January of 85, I transferred to the presidential detail and spent the last 4 years at the White House with on a Ronald Reagan detail.
I mean, what's that like, working in the White House with the president? A great man, I'll throw out there. I think he treated you guys really well from what I've heard.
He was terrific. He was one of the few protectees that I've had, and I'm not going to get in too much to the others, but he was one of the few protectees that I had that was the same on camera as he was off camera. So he could be giving a speech in front of 10,000 people, and he's the same guy saddling a horse up at Camp David or up at the ranch in Santa Barbara. So he was just a terrific guy, and I truly believe I did my protection time under the best of times.
Right.
So after the presidential detail, I went back out and I went quick stint in the counterfeit division at headquarters for 2 years, and then I went back out into the field. And I was a couple of years in Toledo, 4 years in Chicago, and then 3 years in Detroit. And then I got promoted and sent back to D.C. So
Lucky you going to D.C. Not always a promotion in the FBI.
No, I
I know.
People avoid that. A lot of people avoid that, Dan.
Yeah, I know. I had several buddies that we'd done a couple of elbows from the bureau, and I know the feeling.
So you decide to pull the plug with the Secret Service. What year did you do that?
Well, I was an inspection division, which was our version of OPR. And on 9/11, I was 2 weeks after 9/11, I was transferred to the Major Events Division. And in Major Events Division, we did all of the national special security events, which is an event that the White House deems as a potential or likely terrorist target. And along with the Secret Service, we partnered with the FBI, the Special Events Management Unit, the headquarters, and FEMA. And my first NSSE was the Salt Lake City Olympics in 2002. So after a couple of years there, I had decided to retire and we were already part of Homeland Security at that time, but I went over to TSA. They were still standing up the agency there. And I was the director of law enforcement for 3 years there. And then it was time to leave. My son was accepted at Purdue on a scholarship. So we decided to move back to Indiana. So here I am.
Outstanding.
So let's cut to the chase, Dan. Let's start first from a historical perspective. We'll say a presidential candidate or a president already in office. They're going to a venue somewhere, and let's keep it like this one, outdoors. You're somehow in that detail. You're in management. Walk our audience through. You're going to Butler, Pennsylvania, 8 weeks from now. What starts 8 weeks out? What do you?
Well, 8 weeks is a bit far out to start in advance, and we would send an advance team out about a week ahead of time, and we would have a lead advance agent, and then we would have, depending on how many sites you had, you'd have an agent for each site. You'd have a transportation agent for motorcades. You'd have if there was a helicopter lift, you'd have the helicopter LZ agent, and all of these would be together, and they would be under the supervision of the lead advance agent. The lead advance agent, you could be the lead advance agent on one advance, and then the next time, the guy that did, say, motorcades is the lead advance, and then you're working for him. So it's not a question of seniority, or it's mostly experience and just the trust we had in each other to do that. Now, candidate details is a little different. There are usually so many candidates that are involved, and each candidate is given a detail at the time. Unlike former President Trump, he already had a detail, but they have what they call jump teams. And these jump teams will consist of agents throughout the country who have a site agent and an assistant and a lead agent. And these agents will go out and link up with the field offices, and they will conduct the site advance, the security surveys. And in the case of President Trump, which is much higher level, he was apparently given a CAT team, counter assault team, and counter snipers. And of course, we go in and we can't do what we do without the local police assisting us. So we all get together with all the different police agencies who may be involved, state, local sheriffs, whomever. And then we all get together. We have a police meeting, and then we break up into different sites, and you're assigned counterparts, and then you go out and you do these sites. So if there's site agent, for example, in Butler, PA, that site agent should have been, or probably was, teamed up with a local police counterpart. And likewise with motorcades and all the other sites. And you answer to a command post. During a visit, you have a command post set aside, and you'll have the Secret Service manning the radios for the detail. You may have another agent manning details for the post standers on a different frequency. And then you'll have the local law enforcement agencies. Each agency involved will have a supervisory agent, sergeant or above, with a radio right there. So if a command decision has to be made, it's instantaneous.
Now, just so I'm clear, with a radio, his own police department's radio, or one provided by the Secret Service on the same bandwidth?
No, his own police radio. So in the case of Butler, if I've heard all kinds of different stories about police having prior knowledge and what have you of somebody walking down a street with a rifle. I take that with a grain of salt, because if an officer did that, he'd call that in and he'd be sitting next to the Secret Service agent. And the Secret Service agent would then put out man with a gun in the area, and we would take extraordinary measures at that point. So I'm not exactly sure what went wrong here. But something definitely jumped the tracks on this advance. And I don't know who the site agent was. These folks were probably in high school when I was active. But I mean, this is Protection 101. It doesn't change. It's just the basics don't they shouldn't change. So I'm really not sure what happened here. I've heard a lot of different stories. I turn on the TV, of course, our internet, our messaging is going crazy with all our buddies and people we served with back in the day, and I'm not sure what happened, but apparently there was somebody got lax here. The building that the shooter got onto should have been posted. It was high ground within line of sight. I don't care if it's 100 yards away or 500 yards away. That should have been surveyed and posted. If it was that far away, the counter snipers would have had eyes on that at all times.
Let me interrupt you, Dan. When you say
Sure.
posted, what exactly does that mean? Eyes on, or like an officer standing on the roof?
An officer standing on, or an officer and an agent, or an officer and an agent standing on the roof.
Of course.
And so I've always likened, and when I was training agents, I always told them security, the threats are like water. If you leave anything open, if you leave any hole open at all, it's going to seep through. And so there's no such thing as a crowd without a threat. It just doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a rope line without a possible threat on it. And that's why you see us, the staff, the White House staff, have always accused us of shooting a mosquito with a cannon. But that's just the way we operate. But I'm not sure what happened here.
I have to say that the agents involved on the stage area demonstrated extraordinary bravery Saturday night. They risked their lives. Agents are expected in the Secret Service to use their own body to shield and protect you.
Correct.
And regardless of the person's name or their political affiliation. And without hesitation, after the shots were fired in their direction, they selflessly performed that sacred duty for this country. And I think that is when you look at Secret Service agents, that's unbelievable.
Well, that is something that we all know it could happen. It has happened. It happened to a friend of mine, Tim McCarthy, during the Hinckley shooting, and we're trained to react on either the report of a gunshot or a sound gun, somebody calling out gun, either on the radio or in person, and then we react. It's a conditioned response. When we're in our training, doing our training out in Beltsville, it's constant. In the special agents class I was in, we spent half the day in sweats in the gym doing just that, practicing rope lines, practicing gun takeaways, practicing takedowns, handcuffing under adverse situations. Most of us were prior law enforcement when I went through in 1982. So none of us were new to putting cuffs on a struggling protectee. I mean, a struggling suspect. But it's constant and constant and constant. And I can say this. As 9 years as a police officer, in my 5 years on patrol, I was a I was a training officer. I was a tactical officer, a SWAT officer. And that's when I went to detectives and spent the next 4 years there. And I can tell you, when I got to the Secret Service, it was a whole new ballgame. It was a whole new ballgame. And conducting advances, stop and think for a second. They teach how to walk a protectee through a crowd. Think about it for a second, guys. You've got a protectee. There's maybe 6 of you, or 5 or 6 of you around a protectee, and you're walking them through 100,000 people, and everybody wants to shake hands with this guy at the same time. Right. So they teach us how very low key to just what they call it, roll the ball. You just roll their hips. You just with the back of your hand, just roll people's hips away, and you cut right through the crowd. Things like that you don't learn in a police academy. And that's just one example that pops to mind. But it was a very good experience, and I think that the management of the Secret Service has some serious questions they have to answer here.
I agree with that. I agree that there are some serious questions here.
Dan, why don't you back us up a little bit? You told me earlier in a phone call that you actually were one of the training agents or supervisors for the present director, Kimberly Cheadle.
Right.
Do you have any insight about her back then, and certainly what's happening now? And do you think she'll hold on to her job?
Well, the last part I'm not sure about, but I could tell you that back in the mid '90s, around I think it was '95 that I went to Detroit, and Kim was a new agent there, and I was her group leader as a GS-13, and then as a GS-14, I was her, what you guys would call group supervisors. We call it an AT, assistant to the special agent in charge. And I had great hopes for her. She was a good street agent. She was aggressive, dependable, good reports, everything that a new agent that you look for. And then in '97, I transferred out, went back to Washington to Inspection Division, and I had not seen or heard from her after that. But I understand through interview that she did that she is very much into the DE situation.
Hiring, yes.
She wants to, I believe she said 30-30. She wants 30% female agents by 2030. Well, I could tell you right now, guys, cop to cop here.
Yeah.
Anybody who's a director of the Secret Service, their priority must be to protect the President of the United States, the Vice President, and others that we protect, that were mandated to protect and that's all to ensure the continuity of government and also the economic infrastructure of our country, counterfeit currency and what have you, bank fraud. If that's not the priority of a Secret Service director, then that person has no business being in that seat. And that's my personal opinion. So.
Well, I respect that personal opinion, and I think all of us want the best qualified person, and that's if it's 30% women or some other demographic, no one has a problem as long as they meet all the qualifications.
We had female agents when I was on a detail, and in order to back in '84 when I did my what we call the look-see temporary assignment, where we do 2 weeks on the detail from our field office. And they take a look at us to see if they like us, and we take a look at them and see if they if we like them, and then you go through, you do a PT test, and in that PT test, the first thing you start off with are 10 pull-ups, and then you max out on push-ups and sit-ups in 60 seconds, and then you do a 1.5 mile run. You're expected to do it at least under 15 minutes. Everybody is between 9 minutes and 12 minutes. And all of the female agents, they were right there with us, and they were they did. I mean, and they were dependable. They were great. They were terrific, and I hate to think that standards were lowered just in order to put a certain demographic in. I have no problem with female agents or any other minority as long as they can do the job. And there's plenty of folks out there that can do the job, that do meet these DEI so-called qualifications. The problem is attracting them to the outfit. Nobody that I know of, that I served in a Marine Corps with, on a police department with, or in a Secret Service with, wants to be considered. They're giving me a free ride because of they were all, we were all equal. We were all equal, all even, and that's the way it has. If it's not that way now, it has to get back that way.
Well, I think I know in our outfit there's been a watering down of the standards so that certain people can get through. I've heard that from some of our people. I don't know if that's
you mean FBI, right? Just so
I
we're
mean
clear.
FBI, yes. I mean FBI. I don't know if that is the standards in others. I know some police departments have lowered standards,
right?
Just to get people to come in because they can't get people hired,
right?
So you know what, Dan? I think you hit a point that's really, really something that needs to be taken a look at. You're right. It needs to get back to the way it was. I agree with that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let me do a little historical perspective here. And you weren't around the first example I'm going to give, but the three of us here, we lived through now 7 assassinations or assassination attempts in our lifetime. The younger generation, it's been 40 plus years since Ronald Reagan had the attempt on him, and 81 or 82 was it?
82.
So JFK in 63, Martin Luther King in 68. Now they were both with long rifles.
Yes.
RFK Senior in 68, just a few months after Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. George Wallace, I believe, was 72. That's and the last 4 here with shotguns. Gerald Ford had a few attempts. Right. I think they were with one of the Manson women attacked them. Yeah, they had pistols, and of course Hinckley had a pistol with Ronald Reagan. So it's been what's the math there? 60 years or so since a long rifle was used in an assassination attempt. 65, something like that. Yeah. So, and I've talked to some younger people, including my children. They have no knowledge of what it's like for a presidential assassination. That's a good thing, Dan. That means guys like you were doing your job for the last 40 years. So this is a whole brand new, cup of tea for a lot of the younger generation now. And, are we going back? Is this a back to the future type of situation here? And I'm hoping this is a one-off and we go 400 years. It's asking a lot, but for the next event such as this. So, but I guess I want to go back to 48 hours ago. How could that building in the line of sight not be covered, be strategically designated as having people on top of? Where was the mistake made, Dan?
The mistake was made in the advance, clearly. The question you're asking, Jim, is exactly what my peers are asking also. What the heck happened here? Why did that happen? Why was it allowed to happen? Are these agents so, and I don't even know, I don't know who the site or lead agents were. I just don't know. But were they so stretched out, so thin that they were doing 12-hour days, one site to another. That does happen during campaigns. And in all fairness, I can recall times I was on 5 presidential campaigns, and I can recall we would go out on the road for 3 weeks, and then we're back in the office 3 weeks, and then go right back out for 3 weeks. And in the 3 weeks you're out with the candidate, you may hit 4 or 5 cities a day. I can recall, I mean, it's a joke in the Secret Service, but there's some truth to it, where you wake up in the middle of the night and you grab a little notepad to look at the hotel to see what city you're in. You know, it's a joke, but it's not too far off. I've been to every state in the union, and people will ask me sometimes, "Hey, have you ever been to such and such a site?" Yeah, I was there for 20 minutes at the airport for an event, and we're back up and it wheels up again. So, and my wife and I are actually, now that we're retired and we're grandparents and great grandparents, we're going back and doing a little. She was she retired flight attendant, so we're going back to some of the places that we did a quick hit and miss, and we're taking another look at it. But to get back to your point, Jim, Back to the Future is exactly where we have to go. For example, when I was on the presidential detail, you guys know as well as I do that you have to keep training. You have to keep training. You have to keep up on what you got to stay honed. You have to. You can't lose sight of what you're doing. You can't become complacent. So we would have the 3 shifts: the day shift, midnight, swing shift, and at the end of those 3 shifts, so we actually had 4 shifts. You would go into a 2-week training cycle, and in that 2-week training cycle, you do PT, you go back. You academy refreshers, gun takeaways, takedowns. You go out and you do your recalls, your shooting. You do your PT recalls, and then you do attack on a principal training, where we simulate attacks and full blown motorcades and pulling up the hotels that we have built out in Beltsville. We have a mock up of Air Force One out there, and that's extremely valuable, because it keeps you on your toes. It doesn't allow you to become complacent. And I don't know why they stopped that, but I'm sure it had something to do with manpower or whatever, budgetary cuts or whatever.
A question going around, and Ray, you're next, but just real quick here. The counter sniper, I think it's CS for short in
Right.
Secret Service.
Right.
There's 2 of them next to each other. I'm not sure if one's a spotter. It looks like they both had long rifles, and they have microphones you can see with headsets. Did they have to get permission to take that shot? Is there a supervisor?
Not.
Okay.
No, they do not. They give their own green light, and that's what those guys. They qualify with those rifles at 1,000 yards.
Wow.
1,000 yards, guys, in all weather.
Wow.
And the first time they go unqualified, they're grounded until they qualify again. Those guys compete throughout the world in shooting competitions, and they always bring home trophies. So our counter sniper people are part of our uniform division. But once they get in to the CS program, that's where most of them spend their careers. And they are, I've heard, again, listening to the TV, I hear military people who are snipers in the Army or whatever, and they're telling about how things go and happen. I can tell you right now, they have not the slightest clue of how we conduct protective operations. Not a clue. And for anybody to sit up and criticize or second guess these guys who have a split second to act, shots are already being fired at our protectee. Boom, without hesitation, they took the guy out. They took the threat out, and that's what they're trained to do. Bless their hearts. They did their job. I'm proud of all of them.
Dan, if you could take us through in a short period of time here, the shooting happens, shots are being fired. We know what everybody sees what the agents are doing. What's the process from that point forward? What happens?
Cover and evacuate. That's our mantra. Cover and evacuate. When you hear a gunshot, whenever you hear the sound gun, you collapse onto the guy. You saw how they put him down. My understanding is he wanted to get back up and finish his speech, and the detail wouldn't let him. Yeah. They didn't know if there was additional threats out there.
Sure.
And you saw how they collapsed around him and moved him off the stage. The detail did a phenomenal job. It was picture perfect. It was right to the letter of our training. And those guys, they were just the guys and girls. They were fantastic. And again, the fault was in the advance. And I'm not going to say it's the fault of the advance agent. It could very well be that the advance agent requested additional assistance and it was denied because they have the NSSE going on in Chicago or in Milwaukee with the Republican convention because they were manpower short. But that's not an excuse. You know, we have Homeland, we're part of the Department of Homeland Security, and we have Homeland Security agents who are very well versed in our protective operations. They could come in and as co-standers, and we used to use them all the time when we were all Treasury. We would have other Treasury agents, other than Secret Service, come together during campaigns, and we would do jump teams together and protective operations together. There's no reason why we can't reach out for the Homeland Security agents. I hope it's not because they're all down on the border processing people.
Oh,
I hope.
don't even get us started. That's a whole other episode we can do, Dan.
Right.
A real quick anecdote I told
Mhm.
earlier today. You may have been out at this point, but in 2003, the brand new FBI laboratory opened on the grounds of the FBI Academy in Quantico.
Right.
And George W. Bush was coming, the president at the time, was coming to dedicate it, cut the ribbons, give a speech, all that stuff. So it was a couple months out. I said, hey, I've never been in the presence, even close to an actual president. I'm going to sign up and go. We learned, shortly thereafter, the Secret Service is running the entire operation on the grounds of the FBI Academy.
Right.
And we had the order like 3 weeks out, you will not bring your guns to this dedication. And we said, what do you mean? We're FBI agents. That's our academy. You're not bringing your guns. Don't even think about it. So we went without our guns. I don't know if we had to go through metal detectors or not, but I remember saying when I got on the grounds, the lab itself had a couple counter snipers on it. A parking garage adjacent to it had counter snipers. Another building off in the distance had counter snipers and or people up there. And of course, this incident went down. There were no incidents. The presentation went down, no issues at all. And to me, that was a perfectly run, tactical Secret Service operation. I was a little pissed off at first. I couldn't bring my weapon, but I get it. They're in charge. They want no extra weapons on the ground, and nothing bad happened. And the high buildings had people on top. Again, why a low building 120, 30 yards out in direct line of sight of the stage of possibly the future president of the United States, why they didn't have people there, either counter snipers or agents, officers. That's a question that I hope the investigations, probably plural, I hope in a nonpartisan way, in an objective way, can determine some answers for that.
I hope so. I hope so too. And I'm not familiar with the visit to the FBI headquarters, but if I had to make a guess, that was not our call, because we normally, as long as you're an on-duty officer or agent from another agency, we pin you. We give you an e-pin, and that once we verify your credentials and what have you, that wouldn't be hard to do. Quantico, we would e-pin you. So I'm not sure who made that call, but normally we don't do that. And sometimes we'll have off-duty officers will show up at a site and they'll be armed, and they show us our creds, and we just simply ask them, could you go lock it up in the trunk? And I've never seen one get sideways with us. And everybody's always pretty cooperative. But no, you're right. We do that. Again, we're shooting a mosquito with a cannon. Of all the places they're safe, it's right in the middle of a Marine Corps base, right in the middle of the FBI headquarters, but we still have our package, and it's our protocol, and we do it. And we sometimes run into some problems with some staffers, usually volunteer staffers, not staff people who are assigned to the White House, but usually we'll have some volunteer staffers in the field that don't get it. They think, hey, I'm representing the White House here, and you are not going to do this, or you are going to do that. And we simply explain to them, we don't do this by administrative agreement. We do it by law. By black letter law, 18 U.S.C. 3056 gives us the authority to protect the President of the United States, and we do it, and we make the call, we make the audible on site while we're doing the advance.
Yeah.
And I can't recall of any staffer that was ever arrested, but I know of a couple of cases where I wouldn't have been too disappointed if they had been.
I bet you could write a great book if you're willing to name names.
Yeah.
And I've heard other Secret Service agents could do
Yeah, I
that.
know.
I'm going to end it real quick. Our audience likes the behavioral stuff I do. I read an old article by a forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Park Dietz, who actually worked on with the DOJ and the prosecutors in the Hinckley attempt to kill President Reagan, who, of course, for the younger audience, allegedly he shot the president to impress the actress Jodie Foster. And that's all been confirmed and verified. I think he's actually out walking the streets now. That's a whole other story.
Right.
But Dr. Dietz put together, who was the psychiatrist, the reasons why people go after, try to kill presidents. And he broke it down to grievances and performance. And grievances can be personal, spiritual, ideological, philosophical. It could be because they were bullied, like maybe we have some of that. But in this case, but it's also performance. And performance is more vague. But I like the terminology he came up with, and the prosecutors actually used this in the Hinckley trial and prosecution, and that is the shooter, Hinckley, and we'll see if this applies to this guy. We don't say bad guys' names on the show, unless historical ones like Hinckley, but they did it for, quote, fame without work, end quote.
Yeah.
You kill a president, you're famous for life.
Yeah.
For even longer than life. Your life may be ended very shortly. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't last very long. And of course, this guy didn't last 2 days ago. So is it fame without work? Well, you got that.
Yeah, we've done extensive studies on assassins, attempted assassinations, not just on our presidents, but on celebrities and what have you. And one of the things that the psychiatrists that we rely on and that work with us tell us is that at the very moment where an individual attempts to kill a politician, they are themselves.
Yeah.
And so
they call it suicide by cop.
Yeah. Well,
or it could be Secret Service agent, whatever. But that's the mentality.
That's right. You're so.
Mm-hmm.
Ray, any final question or so, and I'll take us out?
Yeah, just one thing. This tragic event at this Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, serves as a stark reminder of the importance of upholding our freedoms while ensuring safety for everyone.
Gentlemen, things could be different. We could be talking about a state funeral.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Today, instead of what happened. And so I'm just very happy that he's okay, and I'm extremely proud of the detail that they grabbed him, covered him, and evacuated him.
Now, thank God for that, and thank God for small favors, because it was God that intervened in this one.
Well, I'll tell you, someone up there likes him, and maybe the rest of us do. And on that note, Dan, we'd like to have you back sometime. Would you consider that?
Sure, just give
I
me
think
a
you
call.
have. I will do
Absolutely.
that. In the meantime, everyone, thanks for this kind of abridged but important episode of Cold Red. We wanted to get in there. Check us out on coldredpodcast.com. Subscribe, like us, all those type things, all our social media sites. And thanks to Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music producer. And we'll see everyone next time. Ray, thanks to you again. Dan, thanks to you again. And see everyone else next time.
Pleasure meeting you guys. Take care. Be
You
safe.
too. Take care, Dan. Thank you.
Mhm.